it was funny how I was sitting in the back, and there were so many key ideas that we've already discussed so far in RCIA. And one of them is how we continually go back to the covenant and the covenant and the covenant and the covenant and the different mentality that the Jews had when Jesus finally came to be. And as I was preparing for the talk, you know, I've been a cradle Catholic all my life. I did leave the church for some time, only because I couldn't make it to youth group that night. So I ended up going to an evangelical church. And one of the things that I missed the most in my heart of hearts were the sacraments. And that's what led me back to the church. And that's how I continued to get involved and so on and so forth. So it took me a while to discern what my purpose during that time in my life was. And we're constantly in that searching, that seeking, because our hearts will always seek our Lord. And, you know, being a cradle Catholic, I've heard the parables over and over and over again, and then some. So it's funny how, as you listen to them, they really don't make sense. And sometimes it's very difficult to apply them into your life. But as you start, you know, reading about them, and reading about Jesus and learning about our Lord, you realize that he always knew his mission and purpose in life. We're constantly seeking it and trying to figure out what God wants us to do, but he knew it. He knew at a very early age. Who has a Bible? Elliot. Or if Lori has, I want you guys to, if you guys can read Luke chapter 2, verse 41 and 52. And this is the verse that really tells us that Jesus knew his mission and his purpose in life. Luke 2.
I got 252.
41 through 52.
Oh, you want 41 through 52?
Yeah. I can read it.
Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover, and when he was 12 years old, they went up according to custom. And when the feast was ended, as they were returning, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem.
Find insufficient doubt about its precise application to tease it into thought. So he was basically just giving you a puzzle, you know, allowing you to apply it, I guess, to your own life, to figure out what its meaning is. And one of my favorite parables is obviously the two sons, the father and the two sons, you know, the prodigal son. Most of the time in my life, I've been the prodigal son, always coming back home and stuff. But the interesting is that as the more you listen to it and the more you meditate, I meditated on it. As I've grown in my life, I have been different people on there. And that's what the parables are meant to be. They're meant to be listened to and read and really just, what is it that God is telling us at that time? You know, for a very long time, I was very happy when I wasn't the one coming home, but you know, for the Jews, this was completely crazy. This did not make sense because according to the laws that God originally gave them, if they disowned the son, that's it. They didn't exist anymore. But here was God talking to them about a son who took his inheritance, threw it all away, came back, and his dad threw him a party, they killed a big calf, you know, it was forgiveness, everything was great. That was completely opposite of what they thought that God was telling them to do. So there was this huge confusion. So a lot of times in my life, yeah, I've been the son that has left and come back, but a lot of times, you know, God calls us to do different things, like forgive, turn the other cheek. You know, Father talked about, you know, how we'll have donations and we'll have this big glass stained window, and sometimes it's really hard being Catholic. You know, I've been to Rome, I've been to St. Peter, and it just completely blew my mind. Perpetual adoration there, I was just like, I almost must be in heaven. It's so opulent. And my first thought was, why should God not have this? And there were some critics like, oh, I cannot believe them crazy Catholics, look what they built, and blah, blah, blah. But why should we not allow the Spirit to move within us to have those intentions in our life? If he has blessed us with it, why can't we give it back? Regardless of what anybody says. Because ultimately, it's really between you and God, and that's the relationship that God came down and wanted, or Jesus came down and I guess wanted to teach us to nurture and to develop.